You're about to enter a new dimension where boundaries of life sciences, data, and technology blur, and AI reshapes what's possible. Welcome to the Improzo, powered by Improzo.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for stepping into the Improzone. We are on the fourth of our four-part series on AI and security. And I am joined again by the illustrious Nathan Trueblood to talk about kind of the last stage that at least we're going to cover in this mini series. I'm sure there's other stages, but really digging into the idea of external facing tools. I think, and certainly in the pharma space, we have the Pfizer foray into a chatbot that can kind of answer any health question you have. But this is really the kind of edge where pharma kind of tends to end their journey when it comes to really embracing AI. And so we wanted to finish with this topic because I think it is one of the most risky, if you will, but also probably the most fulfilling in a lot of ways for value for our pharma colleagues to endeavor to do. So I guess to start, Nathan, what is the difference when you start going external in your AI solutions compared to some of the things we've been discussing thus far that are all kind of internal facing?
Yeah, I think really this is in many ways the final and most exciting frontier for a lot of enterprises, a lot of pharma companies, which is starting to expose really powerful capabilities to customers and partners. Now, in the last episode, we talked a little bit about consuming third-party AI. And in some cases, you may be consuming third-party AI. And we talked about sort of customer service bot that could be customer facing. But in that situation, if it's a third party, you're kind of relying on them to do the homework when it comes to security and safety of AI. And we talked a bit about ways you can partner with a vendor to make sure that they're doing a great job. But now, when we talk about something you're putting out, it's powerful because it could be very differentiating for your company. You mentioned Pfizer. Like, if you can put these capabilities out, really differentiating. I think this is where enterprises are excited. If you roll out AI internally, big productivity gains. If you roll out AI externally, potentially it's powerfully differentiating, and it leads customers and partners to choose you if you get it right. I like to say it's in the path of revenue now
Yeah.
for a lot of companies, and so it's exciting. The difference is you own the whole challenge, because if you're not necessarily using a third party thing, if you're building something, it may be more custom, maybe more bespoke, but that also is what's making it so differentiating. But you now own all the risk, right? Because you built the tool. You
Yep.
can't say, well, it was this third party vendor and they didn't do their homework. Now you own the risk. That also means, potentially direct impact on you from a regulation perspective, from a compliance perspective, right? And so, and I think it's also the highest risk because this is where your customers are involved. Like, if something happens internally, if somebody uses a tool inappropriately, that's not great. But if it's something that happens with a customer, it can immediately impact your core business and your reputation. So
Yeah.
I think it's
It,
the
it,
most
it
powerful
cuts to the
place
core.
and the scariest place for a lot of companies. And we see this every week right now, which is companies know this is differentiating and they're rolling stuff out as fast as they can. And every week somebody, moved a little too fast when it comes to risk and safety and security, and they're embarrassed.
Right. And I think that trust and reputation piece is so fragile, right? Once you make a misstep, it takes a while. I love a metaphor that I loved is the idea is that you earn trust in teaspoons, but you lose it in buckets.
That's
So,
right.
when you
Yeah,
when you
that's
when you
true.
misstep, it's a big old bucket dumped over on your trust. And then you got to go with your teaspoons and try to build it back up again with people. And certainly the most common of these, I think, is kind of that customer service bot type experience, which
Yeah,
many of us have had some really tough experiences where, much like the phone tree bots, where you're like, please let me talk to a person.
right.
How do you kind of make sure that you're thinking through what that experience is going to be like? Because, what are some of the things you got to put in place before? Well, I mean, there's sort of two facets, right? The actual experience being good, but let's set that aside for a second. But just that ability for people to use the tool is safe for the public to consume. Like, what do you really think about before you turn that thing on?
Well, it's funny. I mean, you mentioned, well, there's the experience, and then how do you think about security and safety? I actually want to talk about the experience for a moment. So there's been some chatter in the press lately. MIT came out with something recently, which is is AI more or less, is AI overhyped? We're not seeing the adoption. And the reason I bring this up is because sometimes if you're rolling out something externally, it may be that out of concerns over risk, you sort of dumb down what the AI can do to the point where it's like, hey, we've got this amazing, experience you can have and interact with us. And then people come to it and they're like, it's not that amazing. And a lot of the
Yeah.
time, it's not that amazing because it's locked down so tight out of fear that all it can do is sort of produce pre-canned responses like you're navigating a phone tree and you've now
Yeah,
limited
it
what
becomes
the
almost like
AI.
an FAQ at that point,
Right,
right? It's
that's
like if you ask the
exactly
right
my point.
question, you get a good answer, but
Right.
otherwise,
But otherwise,
yeah.
good luck to you, and that's because it's fear about potentially, unsafe outputs and things like that. So, so one thing I think it's kind of a funny thing is it's so people are reacting in one way by dumbing down the experience, which then customers are like, "Well, this isn't very powerful at all." But if you don't dumb down, so then, okay, make a great experience. But
Right.
then if it does something crazy or unsafe or toxic or biased, and bias is, I think, a really big one in the pharma business. Well, now you've made something powerful, but now people are like, I don't trust this thing at all.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
customer facing applications, customer trust, just like you said, trust is earned in teaspoons and lost in buckets. And AI is a way to scale powerful experiences, but you have to scale trust at the same time.
That
Yeah.
makes sense. And I think that the way that you go about thinking through your experience, I love that idea. And I didn't mean to set it aside. I just was thinking it was more about but they're intertwined, right? Because the experience is only as good as the ability for the tool to be responsive, to,
That's right.
be AI-ified versus just something that's more, rules based, I guess, in terms of what we've had in the past. And most of the chatbots that we've experienced up until this point have been pretty rules based. Like it sounds like you're talking about how to open an account. Let me connect. It's like very, you said something about account. So I'm just going to go with that kind of a thing versus I think when you get it right, it does feel more like you're talking. It's almost you can't tell if it's a person or a chatbot. And that's harder to achieve and certainly not common yet in terms of the level of
But I think that's
quality.
where it's going.
Yeah, I think so too.
One of the segments we work with is, folks who are building contact centers, and things like that. And that's also, I would say, a consideration in the pharma world as well, which is, navigating the phone tree, for
Yep.
example. Um, but if the experience is not great, due to concerns over security and safety, people aren't going to adopt it. So it's balancing those concerns. So it really comes down to, as we've kind of exploring thematically, um, making sure that you have the right safeguards that are specific to your business and specific to that. In this case, we've been talking about a chatbot, but that customer facing experience, making sure that you've assessed the risk and you've put in the right guardrails and that you're monitoring that continuously.
Yeah, and I think, the other question I had is, there's this chatbot is a pretty common category, but how else does this play out? Like, what are the different practices that people have in terms of actually embedding AI into customer engagement as a concept? Like, where else do you see that? And then what are the risks associated with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the chatbot is one of them. And I think what you're concerned about there is really unsafe or unsecure responses, revealing information that's not supposed to be revealed, or revealing information in a toxic way, or being happy to help someone do something that is biased or unfair. So those are the kinds of things that you're concerned about when it comes to sort of conversational AI and so forth. But what I think is coming and is here now is starting now to expose agents to customers. Hey, go do something on my behalf. Go change something on my behalf. So we were just discussing in a previous episode, sort of agents versus conversational. Well, you can have a conversation and maybe ask it to do something, but when you talk about agents, it might be, hey, go buy something for me, go order something for me, go actually do a set of steps. Now the risk gets even higher. So that's another way that I think it's going to show up, which is customers, or pharma, others exposing not just conversational AI, but it's almost like a new kind of API, which is
Yeah.
exposing agents that can do things for you. It might have a conversational interface, it might not. Um, but then they're actually going to go and take action, go actually make changes as opposed to just responding to you. That's where I think then this next frontier gets really interesting, which is uh, you need governance and visibility into the actions that are being taken. It's not only as like what is being requested, but like what does this agent think it's going to go do? And do we and is it going to about to go
Right.
do the right thing? So we
Yeah.
call it, you need agents to govern your agents.
Yeah. Well, and I guess the other thing is that in the traditional human way of doing any kind of customer engagement, I mean, for years we've had, really great documentation, whether it's the different steps people are using when they're interfacing with the software where they're doing tasks like ordering something for you or whatever it is. Or it's also just documenting when a phone call happens, the transcripts, things like that, where you just have the bulk data that you can use to look for patterns or problems or issues or misbehaving or whatever. Now you've got this sort of not very transparent interaction from one agent to another, and you have sort of things that are harder to kind of do a root cause analysis on, right? Because it's not a human in the loop necessarily in every step of the process when you have those agents. So that's another, I guess I'm curious, like as you're thinking about how you get started with these sort of customer facing tools, what are your thoughts? Like where do you get going with this? What's the best place to start if you're going to go external with your
So
AI,
I think
especially agentic AI, I suppose, right?
so I think it's essential, just as we were talking about third-party tooling, it's essential that you assess the risk in whatever you're building. Choose if it's a particular use case, like some conversational experience. If you're going to use a language model, have you assessed it for bias, safety, toxicity, a lot of other things that may show up unexpectedly in that experience. So just simply knowing where are the vulnerabilities, because the nature of AI is no matter how good the model companies get at introducing safeguards directly into the model, um, it's probabilistic. It's never
Right.
going to be 100% safe. So you need to really assess for your use case in your business, where's the risk? Um, and so that should be a pre-production step before you're going to put something out there. Really understand the risk, then put in guardrails, and then test again. Make sure that you are staying secure, compliant according to the regulation that you have, compliant with your own internal policy. Um, so really, again, assess, put in guardrails, and then monitor continuously, because you're going to be seeing, you're really not going to know fully how to protect until you start to get some experience in the wild. And that's what's so scary right now is that, people know they need to get things out there, they need to iterate, but it can't be at the risk of the whole company.
Right. Well, and the wild is it's wild. It's kind of in the pharma world, we talk a lot about real world evidence, right? So you have a clinical trial, it's a pretty artificial environment. There's a lot of monitoring and kind of curtailing of people getting out of line with the protocols and things like that. And then you get into the real world where you're launching this product and people can use it in some ways however they want, right? Physicians can write things off of the label. They can do
That's right.
whatever they feel like they want to do with their patients. It's akin to that, I think, in this realm too, because you're talking about the real world of customer engagement, and it's not always going to be the way you conceptualized it when you built the
Well,
tool.
and
And
this
so
is where
that's, yeah,
this is another aspect of that monitoring we were talking about, and this has kind of been thematic. You need to keep an eye on what are your employees doing with AI. Uh, Now, if you have something that is customer facing, um, you want to do that, yes, so you can tune guardrails, but you're required to do this from an audit perspective.
right.
So it's not just a good idea so that you can make sure your safety mechanisms are there. You need to show that you have the proper controls in place, that you can record these conversations, that you have an audit log, and if you have the right compliance guardrails, that you can show, hey, this particular interaction happened and we flagged it and we took appropriate action. And that's where sort of guardrails really come in, which is we assess the risk to figure out, with red teaming, assess the risk, but then put in guardrails. And those guardrails are your mechanism for producing evidence that you have the right controls when it comes to dealing with, you know, customer data. Maybe they're uploading, information, could be patient information. You need to
Right.
show that you have the right controls in place to handle that data appropriately.
Yeah. I think that's the thing that people have to really think through is that once you offer the option for people to interact with you, you have to be aware of what could end up now in your environment when they give you so that idea of uploading a document, right? I mean, we have in pharma so many types of information that are sensitive or have this additional set of rules around them that need to be thought through. If you didn't ask for that, right, if you're like, send us a picture of your cat, and and someone puts something with PHI on it in there, they could do that, right? There's nothing really
Absolutely.
that, that's the risk you have to be thinking through in the pharma space. To be fair, it's probably a risk even if you're not in the pharma space that someone could accidentally upload the wrong thing and now it's
Oh, for
the
sure.
whole thing, right? So I think that's part of the excitement in terms of just the value proposition. Like you said, when we started this conversation, like, why would you even do this? Well, because you're moving into the revenue and you're potentially going to be changing the trajectory of your whole company if you get this right. So there's
Exactly.
this really high reward potentially coming your way, but then the risk just kind of exponentially grows along with it. So it's
And
the,
thinking of this through the lens of agents, right? Because we were
right.
talking about conversational. So in the future, and the future is not very far off right now, there is going to be armies of agents that will do things on behalf of a customer. So a customer might ask for something, and one agent might go to look up some information. Another agent might go look up a different piece of information. A third agent might come together and then take action on behalf of the first two. There's going to be a whole army of AI-powered agents that are all there to drive this really powerful and delightful experience for the customer. But also, you need to be monitoring the conversations between all those agents, just like you might say, this call may be monitored for quality. Oh my goodness, if you have 1,000 agents that are working or 10,000 agents that are working, you need to be watching those conversations to make sure that they're appropriate and that one of these agents isn't going off the rails. But you also need to
Yeah.
be monitoring all of that from a compliance and audit perspective. Did you put in the right controls so that, hey, these two agents were having a conversation about something and working on something for a customer, and then it went crazy?
Right.
You know,
And you have to
did
see what the
guardrail catch
conversation
that
was.
or didn't it?
Yes.
Do we have a log of that whole interaction? Can we understand and unlock why the agent made that decision? And this is why you need, agents to monitor your agents.
Yeah, I think that orchestration of agents, whether it's for internal or external use cases, it's going to become the next wave of both security risk and opportunity, which I think is maybe a good theme across this whole series. Is that as you step further into this world, you keep upping kind of the ante between the opportunity for value, whether it's just in productivity gains or potentially revenue gains, but also the risks start to compound as well in terms of where things can hiccup and cause unintended consequences that can be very damaging to reputation, to your business, to the bottom line. So it's a good kind of like double-edged sword that we're heading into here.
It
So
it's
I
powerful, and
want,
I would say
yeah,
these
I'll
concerns
give
over
you the last
security.
word on this.
I was going to say the concerns over security and safety are, my opinion is um, that's a limiting factor on that opportunity for most of these enterprises. And so, if you get your security and safety strategy right with AI, then you're going to be more responsive to your customer. You're going to be more productive, and you're going to win in the market.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing I would say there is, we've talked about in this series a bunch of different use cases, whether it's just someone using AI internally or they're starting to build internal tools. Today we talked about exposing something externally. I'm seeing that customers don't want to have a different point solution for every single one of those. Like our policy is our policy. There might be different use cases, but we need to think about this holistically for the company. And so
Yeah.
that's something I'm seeing as an emerging trend, which is um, you need to experiment and learn in these specific use cases, but overall it leads to you'll need probably a single layer or a platform that you can use at your company
Yeah.
to protect against all these risks.
Well, it reminds me a little bit of when single sign-on became, now it's pretty turnkey for the most
Yep,
part,
yep, yep.
but it was super clunky at the beginning, right? You'd often not be able to get in or it wouldn't work. And so that single platform where you would have all of your applications using the same sign on, same password
Yeah,
was
that's right.
almost like, don't make me do the single sign on, please. I just want to roll out my
That
application.
allowed IT to express a policy
Yes.
around authentication for every single application, and it wasn't bespoke for everyone, and you didn't have a different risk profile for everyone. Yeah, great metaphor, Jane, because it's the
Yeah.
same thing. Like you want a single trust layer that you can apply to all these different AI use cases.
And I think at the beginning of that, if you remember, it was really painful. And obviously the before where you're typing in a different username and password for all the 20 different tools, and you've got post-it notes all over your desk to help you remember all of the different passwords. That was really painful. And now we kind of forget about that phase. And now we're in this place where for the most part, you just sign in with whichever platform and you're good to go. So
Use
I think,
whatever tools. There's a single
yeah.
mechanism, and the security and compliance is happening in a consistent way.
And I think that's where Encrypt comes into play. It's kind of that single sign-on for AI security in a lot of ways because you don't once you get it figured out and you have a consistent approach for all of the different things you're doing, it just simplifies that whole process in a way that makes it now it feels, of course, we would use single sign-on. Why would you want a separate
And
username and
then when you
password?
have that, it's so much faster to adopt a tool. It's so much faster to sign in,
Yeah.
and so ultimately, it's all about speed.
Yeah.
Uh,
And now you can deploy more of these things faster and test them and iterate on them and all of that
that's
because you're
right.
not worried about the security. You're more worried about the right interface, which
Yeah,
is
so
what
the
we were all
enterprises that figure this out are gonna be the ones who win.
yeah. That's it. So I think in terms of like this whole series, hopefully if you haven't, you should definitely go back and listen to the first, second, and third. We have a really nice, I think, build here of people entering the space of AI, people starting to use AI to build things internally, people
Mhm.
buying the third party tools that are out there that they can use that have AI as part of their deliverable or solution. And then ultimately what we just talked about, which is building things that are external facing, customer facing solutions and using them to really differentiate your overall company. I feel like this has been a really helpful kind of tutorial across the different stages of maturity that companies are going to go through, and especially in the pharma space where there are definitely companies in all of these stages
Yes.
to think through how you get from one to the next and get the full value and opportunity out of all of that amazing technology that's coming our way. So thank you once again, Nathan, for this amazing series. I think hopefully people will learn a ton and get a lot of value and learn kind of more about where Encrypt AI is so valuable for their AI security needs. And also that, you when you're doing something in the healthcare space, it's going to be helpful to have people who really know the healthcare space's unique attributes and unique challenges from a partner like Improzo that's been in this space for years in terms of just our backgrounds. So I think it's really nice to see the sort of that the combination, right, of the tech, the security, and the domain coming together. So hopefully that was helpful for people. And
Yeah,
again,
I'm excited
yeah,
to see how this all unfolds. I mean, every company has its own journey of maturity, but it's exciting times, and yeah, thrilled to see how companies will win using the technology.
100%. And so again, I thank you so much for stepping multiple times into the Impro zone over this series, the fourth step. And I encourage folks to go back and listen and to check out, of course, we mentioned a few different articles and things, but also check out Encrypt AI and check out Improzo. And thank you again so much for listening today. Have a good one.
All right, thanks, Jane.
This has been the Impro Zone, improving life, empowering customers. Follow us and stay tuned for what's next.